That's so impressive.
I know, it's a thing that exists.
Yeah, man.
All right, how's that? Too much? Too tall?
No, I think that's perfect.
Okay.
All right, friends, I'm about to start up the live video here.
We already have a chat.
Oh,
Oh, that's a test.
that was me there. Okay, perfect. Now we are live on Facebook now, so I think we'll go ahead and start up if folks are ready. So thank you everybody at home for joining us for this legislative town hall with Senator O'Neill and Representative Hochman-Vigil here. My name is Devram. I'm working with the Speaker's office, and I'll be here in the background helping to feed questions to our legislators here. So for all you folks who are joining us from home, if you are watching via Facebook, you can put any questions that you have for our legislators into the comment section below, and we'll do our best to get to them. Or if you are joining us via Zoom, you should have an option to hit the button Q&A at the very bottom and pose your question to the legislators that way as well. And we will do it that way. All right, and with that, I'll turn on over to our legislators to kick it on off.
All right, hi everybody. I'm Representative Day Hochman-Vigil. I'm the District 15 representative in Albuquerque, and thanks so much for joining us for our virtual town hall. I'll let Senator O'Neill take over from there, introduce himself.
Sure, State Senator Bill O'Neill, District 13, and thanks everyone for joining us on this, what is it, Monday at 5:30. And basically, I think the focus for tonight will be what happened during the special session. And so Representative Hochman-Vigil and I can give you an update. And I know, speaking for my colleague, we want to hear from you. I want to hear questions, just what's on your mind and so forth. So we'll probably keep our introductory comments to a minimum and just go from there.
So as many of you know, we had a special session beginning on June 18th that was called by the governor specifically to address fallout from the coronavirus pandemic, which I'm sure everybody is well aware of at this time. Mostly we had, well, several tasks in front of us. We had to shore up some budgetary shortfalls that we had for this current fiscal year leading into next. And we also tackled some additional issues, including election reform. We passed what is called the Small Business Recovery Act. We also established the New Mexico Commission on Human Rights?
Civil rights.
Civil rights to address the liability issue with regards to police violence. And what am I missing, Senator O'Neill?
Well, basically, as everyone knows, our main obligation to you as constituents is to do the budget, to make sure that we have a responsible, balanced budget. So that was the big thing that we did during the special. And what we did was we reduced the budget that we had passed back in January by 600 million. We were looking at almost a $1.5 billion deficit, depending on how you look at the numbers. So we took a big chunk there with a $600 million reduction. We also reduced some of the state departments. There's this euphemism called sanding, which means cutting expenses on state government. So we did that 4% across the board, except obviously for the Department of Health and Human Services and Public Education. We also went in and we reduced our capital outlay expenditures, some projects that we just had to 86. But what was great to me about the special session is that we worked in a bipartisan way. There wasn't a whole lot of drama in terms of the numbers, what was going to be cut. But of course, we all know that looking forward, our next budget is going to be the real task. I mean, my goodness, it's going to be really hard to balance the budget this coming January. So, but for now, we're looking good. And we were in and out of there, on the Senate side in 3 days. And so I felt really positive about what we accomplished during the special session. But again, the focus has always been for us is that's our big obligation and responsibility is to do the state budget. So that's my summary.
And as many of you know, New Mexico is very dependent on revenue sources from the extractive industries, oil and gas. And so when New Mexico got hit by the double whammy of both the pandemic and the crash in oil prices per barrel, we really had to act quickly so as to make sure that we shored up our budgets appropriately and that we can continue to invest in the priorities that we had set forth for ourselves in the previous session in January. So Senator O'Neill already mentioned teacher raises. We also wanted to make sure that public safety is still a priority and that we still see increases in public safety spending that we feel comfortable making. Also, I want to take a moment to mention that we had the foresight, the appropriators had the foresight of building into the January budget when we were still flush with cash, 26% in basically a rainy day fund to make sure that we had stowed some money away in the event that something like this occurred. So that 26% what really came in handy when we had to act quickly. And so I think that we had a good framework in mind when we went into the session in January, and we had to make some tweaks and adjustments to the framework of the budget in order to make sure that we stayed solvent. But overall, like Senator O'Neill said, we're looking good. We do have some tough choices to make in January. That's a longer budgetary process through the 60-day full legislative session. And again, a budget is a reflection of our values, right, and our priorities. So we're really going to have to continue to watch the effects of the pandemic on New Mexico's budget. We need to continue to push forward and diversification of revenue sources and investments in small business and economic development to really make that happen. But I too was really proud to be a part of the process. We worked really well in a bipartisan manner for the most part. Every single legislator there had a job to do. It was a somber affair. We all were wearing masks for the most part. Many of us chose to get tested before we got there, while we were there, and then after we left, just to make sure that we were responsible and avoiding the virus. So it was an interesting experience for me to be in a special session. It was my first special session. I know that you've been through many of them, Senator, but overall, I'm so proud to be a part of this body because we really work well together and we respect each other immensely, and it just makes it a pleasure to serve even in the most somber of circumstances.
All right. Well, with that, can we go to questions? We want to hear from our participants.
Absolutely. So we have our first question coming in from Peggy, who's joined us on the Zoom call here. And she asks, will there be a report about the primary election as to how many ballots were rejected, either due to lateness or errors, and to see if we can troubleshoot problems as we go into elections in the future?
Right. Well, I can say, Peggy, and thanks for that question. You know, a big part of what we did during the special was took the form of Senate Bill 4. And what we did is we cleaned up a lot of the problems that were apparent with the primary that we all went through. To answer your question, I think, you know, our interim committees are starting up, I believe, in August. And certainly one of the committees, hopefully the one that Representative Hochman-Vigil and I serve on, courts, corrections, and criminal justice, will look into that. Or I'm sure that I'm just so glad you raised that question because we need to find out exactly what happened in that primary. But rest assured, we did a good job again in a bipartisan way. And this isn't easy. You know, election protocols are very, very divisive for some reason. So we were able to come together on a sound bill, Senate Bill 4, and one of the components of that bill is basically that the Department of Health Secretary has the power to declare an emergency and basically call for mail-only elections if in November we're looking at that kind of landscape. And so that is reassuring to me personally, and I think we have just some really good. We did some really effective tweaking of our election process.
We also, another really great element about Senate Bill 4 was the establishment of voting convenience centers throughout the state. So right now, if you live in Bernalillo County, which is a county that elects to utilize voting convenience centers, you can vote at any voting center throughout the county, even if it's not the voting center to which you're assigned. So that makes it a lot easier to cast your ballot, either if you're just dropping off your absentee or you're voting earlier on actual election day. So that bill allowed for the establishment of voting convenience centers in every single county throughout the state, just to make the process easier. And like Senator O'Neill said, we just cleaned up some language and made it so that our Secretary of State can continue to do a fantastic job, as she has been doing in a really difficult era right now. So Senate Bill 4 was really important. We had a few fireworks in the House over that bill. We had to bring it back after we had a couple of discussions about it. But as always, election issues are perennial, and I'm sure there will be further adjustments down the road in January.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, legislators, for that great comprehensive answer. We do have another question coming in from Charles Goodmacher here on Facebook, who first thanks you both for the work you did to protect education during the special session. And he wants to know, he says, increasing state revenue in a progressive fashion is now one of the #1 priorities for the state. And he said both of your thoughts on how the legislature is looking to increase revenue during the next legislative session.
Well, I can go with that. I mean, as we all have to recognize, the oil and gas money isn't there. It's not you know, responsible to depend on it the way that we have. And as you know, as everyone knows, it's 40% of our state budget comes from oil and gas. So yeah, it's great when we're booming, but it's, look at us right now. So we have to be creative. I know personally, I am hopeful that we can finally come together on a legalization of marijuana bill. That you know, relies on, you know, learning from other states that have done this and avoiding their mistakes. But that's, for example, that's quite a potential source of revenue. Also, I mean, we're blessed with alternative sources of energy out here in New Mexico, and I look forward to hearing other strategies that I'm sure people are working on. But you know, I think there's an emerging consensus that we just can't continue to ride this roller coaster of oil and gas.
Yeah, I agree, Senator. I mean, it's irresponsible to continue this boom and bust mentality because it really takes a toll on our state every time we go through these vacillations in revenue. We really need to take some bold steps, I believe, and make some major investments in economic development. Our tax base is too narrow. We need to look at our corporate tax base. We need to look at offshoring opportunities. The coronavirus pandemic, although absolutely tragic, has kind of exposed some really deep problems that we have in our society with regards to the haves and the have-nots. And in addition to considering that, we have to look at how we can offer opportunities up to everybody, working families, people that have been in New Mexico for generations or have just been here a year, continue small business support. There's offshoring opportunities. I'm actually working with a coalition of business-minded people throughout Albuquerque and the state to present a white paper to the Lujan Grisham administration about how we can utilize offshoring opportunities from countries like China to do manufacturing here so that we can make sure that the issues we had with supply chain don't ever happen again, so that we can bring manufacturing to New Mexico locally and throughout America so that we're not so dependent on global industries, and we can feel better if we ever find ourselves in a situation where we're out of toilet paper and many folks don't know what to do about it. There's great opportunities with regards to STEM research. We have fantastic aerospace corporations here. You know, Senator, I'll never stop talking about those opportunities because they're near and dear to my heart. But we have amazing opportunities in New Mexico. We have fantastic and educated people here who want to either start a business themselves or help expand the tax base. And we really need to take advantage of those opportunities and invest wisely, continue to support the Economic Development Department with local economic development funding and JTIP, the job training placement funding, so that we can continue to increase our tax base and diversify our revenue. It can't just come from oil and gas.
Awesome. Thank you, Representative Hochman-Vigil and Senator O'Neill, for that great answer. We do have another question that has come in on Zoom from Lance Chilton, who is following up on the elections bill. And he is curious about the rules regarding convicted felons and their right to vote. And he was curious if that bill touched that issue or if that's something that the legislature is looking at down the line.
I can answer that one. I don't believe that we touched that issue with Senate Bill 4. That was actually a bill that we considered in both the 2019 session, and I believe it is going to be brought back again in 2021 during the full policy session. But I know that we had the bill that we passed with regards to clearing records for certain levels of misdemeanors and felonies, so that folks that have completed their probation and parole can have that expunged off their record, so that they're no longer punished for past deeds for which they've made up for. And but I don't think that issue specifically was touched in Senate Bill 4. Do you recall anything about that?
Yes, well, and thank you, Dr. Chilton, for that question. The way it is right now is a convicted felon can vote if they successfully complete their parole. So the issue is why there's been all kinds of problems with paperwork and making sure people know how to clear their records, as the representative said. So the initiative that I am aware of that started in the House that didn't make it to the Senate during our full session was to simplify that process. If you're released from prison, you can vote. I think that's my understanding, but that's not where we are right now. But the bottom line is that in New Mexico, convicted felons can vote, but it's a kind of a bureaucratic mess in a way. So we want to make sure that that's streamlined. So
that sounds great, Senator. Thank you so much for that answer. And we've got Dr. Chilton actually with another follow-up question coming in on Zoom. And he's asking about restoring the progressivity in personal tax rates that were eliminated over the past years and what your thoughts are were on that issue.
Well, I can say
you were around when that happened the first time.
Right.
So.
Well, no, I wasn't there when the legendary Richardson tax breaks went into effect for the high income earners back in the day. And, we're leaving a lot of money on the table. And, I feel strongly that we need to look at that issue and restore the progressivity of our individual income tax. We need to really look at all these things. I don't have a magic formula for that, but I have sponsored bills like that in the past. Senate Bill 50, I sponsored, which basically to repeal those tax cuts. I poll this every time before the session in our District 13, and even I have a fairly affluent district, and even in my district, the majority of people favor at least looking at that tax break that was passed under Richardson. So that could spin off something like, I think at one point we were looking at potentially $300 million. I mean, that might be a little generous, but it's a significant amount of money, and we just everything needs to be on the table right now. So to answer your question, by all means, I mean, as your state senator, I will definitely be looking at that issue and sponsoring legislation in that area.
Well, and to piggyback on that, Senator, I'm not sure if anybody saw the op-ed that was written by Representative Javier Martinez, who's going to be the incoming chair of the House Tax Committee, about how we need to restore the progressivity of our personal income tax system and have really a just system for everybody. And with the the influx of new senators in the January 21 session, I think it's a whole new world with regards to those types of considerations and putting stuff on the table that wouldn't necessarily have been considered before. So I think all possibilities will be laid before us, and it'll be interesting to see how we make the most of it and really kind of take advantage of the chance to take bold progressive steps for the betterment of the state.
That sounds great, legislators. Thank you so much for the answer. And we do actually have a follow-up question from Veronica Reed, who is joining us on the Zoom call here. And she's wondering if there's any expectations to eliminate the state income tax on Social Security income, or if you think there'll be any adjustments on the state income tax to provide some economic relief because of the pandemic.
So I actually sponsored several different representatives sponsored the same bill this past session, which was to eliminate the Social Security income tax. For how little it contributes, it is definitely something I think we need to take a look at, especially since we need to keep our seniors here in New Mexico and continue to make sure that it's a desirable place to stay and retire. So we were unsuccessful this past session, even though 4 different representatives brought the same bill. I know that I'm committed to bringing it again in the 21 session if it hasn't already been spoken for before me. And I am committed to working with everybody to put together a bill that's acceptable and has a good chance of passing. But yeah, also, I mean, the state has, I believe, waived all income tax penalties and fees. July 15th continued to be the due date for taxes, but if you didn't get them in, you won't be penalized or have fees assessed right now. So that was something that we could do in the immediate future to bring some economic relief. However, I imagine that the issue will continue to come up in January when we're re-examining the budget. I think that we've had more discussions in terms of more proactive measures like Senate Bill 3, which was the Small Business Recovery Act, and possibly other ways of assisting New Mexicans individually, proactively as opposed to reactively with taxes. I don't know if you have anything to add, Senator.
No, that about covers. Well, I support that idea. And I think, again, this is a potential bipartisan effort. And you make a good point about how little we get from that tax. That's news to me. So that would make it even more attractive to at least to look at that and really do right by our retirees. We get, as you know, we both get a lot of emails on that particular subject.
We do. It was a hot button issue when I was going door to door, when I was allowed to go door to door.
Oh, right. Yes, those were the days.
Yes, indeed.
Awesome. Well, thank you, legislators, for that answer. We do have a question coming in from Teresa Storch, who is joining us via Zoom. And she wants to know if you guys can speak to redistricting, to see if that will be coming up for discussion in the next legislative session, and if there are any specific models already being discussed to tackle that.
Well, I can say, as one who has sponsored the bill to go to an independent redistricting commission to get rid of as much as we can in a reasonable way to get rid of the gerrymandering that is really at the source of our political dysfunction. I think about everybody can agree on that. And I was disappointed, of course, with the Supreme Court not ruling against that practice. On the other hand, there's lots of shades of gray, and other states have gone to varying degrees with the independent redistricting commission. I can say, because we're so close to redistricting, I don't anticipate a lot happening. It's hard. We talk about bipartisanship, but this one is a hard one to get folks to agree on that before our actual redistricting session. But just know that I personally will continue to champion that, and there is plenty of support for that effort. New Mexico can be a leader in a lot of ways, and it would be something if somewhere in time as a legislature we could really acknowledge that gerrymandering doesn't help anybody, and that it's not like a given. We can create different realities. So that's my 2 cents worth.
And to bring it locally, I mean, I want to take this opportunity to put a plug in for completing your census forms. Many people don't realize the importance of the census. Every decade, the federal government has to do a survey of the United States population, and what's at stake with regards to that is for anybody that's undercounted, that's federal funding that we lose with regards to access to education, services, infrastructure funding. There's just too many things to talk about that we would lose out by virtue of New Mexicans just failing to fill out that very simple form, which for the first time ever, you can access online. It took me literally a minute and a half to fill it out. And that was for my whole household. So as we're awaiting the census to conclude and they continue to push it out because of the obvious reasons, that's when we'll get all the data that we'll use for redistricting. We will be going into a special session, I believe in October, not this October, but the next, so that we can break out into the redistricting group. I serve on the State Government Elections and Indian Affairs Committee, which I believe will be tasked somewhat with redistricting. And we've all started studying up now because it's actually a pretty nuanced process. And you want to be as fully engaged and educated on it as possible, so as to make sure you get a good result. I too would support the independent redistricting commission. I know that it can be a sore subject amongst many because you give up a lot in the beginning, what you'd be gaining in the end. But ultimately, I think we have to push for what's fair. And if we have an independent commission, then eventually we can kind of put the partisan rancor at rest and focus on doing our job as legislators.
Sounds great. Well, I think that was a very comprehensive answer on the topic of redistricting here. So we do have a question coming in on Facebook from Rebecca Puck-Stair, who is asking that now that we're in the interim, she's curious if there's a interim group working on overhauling the tax code given the current economic situation, and also to see if there's specific ways to replace oil and gas revenue that may not be coming back into the budget down the line.
So like I mentioned before, hi Puck, thanks for tuning in. Javier Martinez, Representative Martinez, who's the incoming chair of tax, has made several mentions of his intent to take a hard look at the tax code and really reevaluate it, not just in relation to the pandemic, but I think, for previous years, because we have, I think, an outdated tax code that doesn't accurately represent the interests of New Mexicans and how we kind of pan out as a state. So he, I think, is working with several other legislators to take a hard look at the tax code, probably those on the tax committee. And I would pay close attention to his Facebook. His social media accounts are always very well maintained. Like I said before, 2021 is going to be the year for reform, I believe, and tax reform will probably be a part of that. I also believe I've heard Representative Mo Maestas mention the possibility of tax overhauls, but everything's on the table, and now is the time to consider additional revenue sources. I mean, to be specific, Senator O'Neill already mentioned recreational marijuana, or cannabis, as we prefer to call it. I too am in favor of recreational cannabis for several reasons. I am also in favor of continuing to support the film industry. I have seen firsthand how that has really helped our state and brought in a lot of dollars to New Mexico that we otherwise would not have gained access to. And again, continuation and development of STEM and science-based technologies and industries. Aviation, aerospace, every time aerospace. I'm telling you guys, we are poised to be the global leader in aerospace, and there's not even much that we have to do about it. Spaceport is already here. We have a lot of interest from global corporations who want to come in and take advantage of New Mexico's beautiful weather, our expansive spaces, our available workforce, and our cheap land. And not many other places have that unique combination of factors. We just need to get the word out. I'm sure I'm forgetting others. So.
Right. Well, that's good, and that's an excellent question, because again, it's going to be the conversation in the next full session, because we have to figure out how can we get the revenue that we need without this reliance on oil and gas. So I think the timing is right for a tax overhaul, and it's certainly something that we've been talking about. I believe what Representative Jason Harper in your chamber, representative, has been leading an effort in that regard, but there's definitely been a big focus on it. But now I think we don't have the comfort to talk about it. We really need to act.
Gross receipts, yeah. So Representative Harper is known as the authority on tax matters, especially gross receipts tax, and New Mexico is rather convoluted and confusing.
Right, all the carve outs.
scheme with something like 65 different waivers as codified in statute.
Yes.
But, you know, the old saying goes, if you want a tax break, just get yourself a friend in Santa Fe. But I think that gross receipts tax reform has been coming down the pike for a while. Representative Harper has been working tirelessly in a bipartisan manner, actually, with other members of the tax committee, and I think the Speaker's office, to really take a hard look at gross receipts tax. There's several factors why we even have a gross receipts tax, too long to mention or get into here. They're mostly historical, but yeah, gross receipts tax reform needs to happen, and that needs to be a big part of whatever package that we consider in the coming year.
Good stuff. Thank you, legislators. So we have plenty of good questions coming in on Facebook, and I think we'll go to our Public Regulation Commissioner, Cynthia Hall, who is curious about what efforts that will be taken in the next session to expand rural broadband infrastructure within the state.
Gee whiz, I mean, we've talked about that forever. You know, it just has to happen. I mean, yeah, like we just can't afford to have the rural parts of our state, you know, be minus broadband. And it's you know, it's just like so much. A budget is a reflection of a state's priorities, and that is definitely a priority. And I'm not sure exactly where we are with that right now, but I know, you know, we talk a lot about it on that science and technology interim committee that I'm on, and it just has to materialize.
So, hi, Cynthia. We spoke earlier today at length about this issue. Cynthia is a public regulation commissioner, and she works tirelessly for expansion of broadband and other infrastructure issues in New Mexico. And absolutely, broadband in
Are you there?
We might have just lost connection with the representative here.
Okay.
You can't see me?
Oh, now you're back.
Speaking of broadband issues.
Wow.
So yeah, broadband expansion, #1 priority, especially with COVID. There are people and entities and working on this issue, especially the governor's office. I know that the Economic Development Department is working on it. Secretary Alicia Keys, in conjunction with the Department of Information Technology, who also recognizes the importance of broadband expansion. We just have to think outside the box. We have this problem in New Mexico called the last mile provider problem, which means for our really rural communities, it is too expensive to consider traditional ways of expanding broadband infrastructure to get that last mile connectivity for all of our rural communities. So for instance, if we were going to lay fiber optic cable to allow for 100% broadband access to the state, it would cost us $2.8 billion with a B dollars. And that's simply, it's just not a workable solution. So we have to turn to alternative technologies, which great news, there's actually development of technologies here in New Mexico, fantastic opportunities that everything is being looked at. The the Department of Information and Technology just put out a grant to a specific broadband provider that provides services for our Native communities on the Navajo Nation and in other rural parts of Arizona and New Mexico. Also, there's a lot of CARES Act funding. New Mexico received $1.25 billion of CARES Act. We're waiting to hear back from our federal delegation as to what the restrictions are on spending that money. The less number of restrictions we have, the more we're at liberty to utilize those funds for like broadband expansion, because our children are stuck at home and they're not being educated. I was just at a Legislative Finance Committee meeting last week where we were told that we're expecting children in the state of New Mexico to be behind anywhere from 6 months to a full year after we close the schools with regards to COVID. So we have a lot of time to make up, and we really can't feel fully comfortable doing that until everybody has equal access to broadband. We're also forming an informal, we're calling it the Broadband Caucus in the House. There's several legislators, representatives that are working on that issue in addition to me, but everybody recognizes, I mean, it's the great equalizer, you know, access to information is everything. And if we can make that happen for all of our communities throughout New Mexico, it'd be a game changer. Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much, legislators and Representative. I agree. I think that was a well-timed internet outage there for the question here.
I told Comcast to do that.
Good. Awesome. I think we will we'll turn back to another question we have coming in on Facebook from David Burke, who wants to talk about mental health during the pandemic here. And he says that we obviously have limited resources within the state to address mental health, and the fact that this pandemic is having an effect on everybody physically and mentally. He wants to know if the state is looking at any mental health initiatives in the next session or down the line.
Well, I want to thank David not only for the question, but for the fine work that he does with that wonderful program, Serenity Mesa, which provides addiction services to teens, inpatient. Anyway, yes, David, particularly, we're beginning our interim process with not only the Health and Human Services Committee, but the Behavioral Health Committee, and I'm the co-chair of that. So by all means, I will let you know when we're meeting. A lot of this is just trying not to go backwards. We're just faced with a really daunting funding equation. So how do we protect what we absolutely need to protect and not suddenly find ourselves moving backwards? So I hear you loud and clear. Mental health is huge. In New Mexico, we're still recovering from that catastrophic audit that put all those behavioral health providers out of business back in 2000, whenever that was, 13 or something like that. But anyway, so we really, I hear you loud and clear, and thanks for the question.
Thank you. Hi, David. Thanks for tuning in. I also want to commend you for your work. Serenity Mesa is an incredible program, and we're lucky to have it here in New Mexico. I share Senator O'Neill's sentiment. Mental behavioral health is everything, I think, in the state of New Mexico, and it kind of lies as a foundational issue for some of the other issues that we have with regards to the recidivism cycle and our criminal justice involved populations, our child welfare issues, cyclical and generational trauma. As you know, David, I've spoken with you at length. This is kind of my pet issue. I came to the legislature wanting to work on mental and behavioral health, especially rejuvenation of our workforce and our infrastructure after the Great Purge of 2013. I'm working with a couple other legislators and Senator Jerry Ortiz-Pino, and I was going to ask you, Senator O'Neill, if you wanted to help us. We are still working on, I want to call it the Mental Behavioral Health Rejuvenation Act of 2021, but it's going to be kind of an omnibus bill that a compilation of issues that we've identified that are holding us back with regards to providing mental behavioral health resources and funding to New Mexicans that need it most. And it's going to consider everything from licensing and credentialing issues that we're seeing with the regulation and licensing department to participation in electronic medical records so that we can have care coordination and guarantee a continuum of care for all services at all levels. So I'd actually love to talk to you about it, David, if you get a moment. And it's really exciting stuff. I'm also working with the governor's office. I'll put in a quick plug to say that I hope that the governor will consider making this a governor's bill in January because it should be a priority for everybody. But in the interim, we are fighting really hard to maintain. We had a 30% increase in Medicaid reimbursement rates this past session. And we're working really hard to make sure that those reimbursement rates are not cut as part of the budgetary crisis. We are receiving additional federal funding for mental behavioral health and Medicaid, although we don't anticipate it'll be enough. So we need to fight because we can't afford to cut mental behavioral health now, not with what's going on with the pandemic, not with the types of stressors that people are experiencing.
Sounds great. Thank you for that comprehensive answer, legislators. So we do have a question coming in on Facebook from Nazneen Rahim, who is curious if you guys know if the governor's Council on Racial Justice has selected its members already, and if you guys knew of any of the work that is coming out of that council at the moment.
Well, thanks for that question. I hope she hasn't, because I've put in a request to be on that committee, but I don't expect, there's many qualified people that can be on that council, but I haven't heard anything, but I'm sure she's taken her time going through many applicants. While there was a lot of interest, there has been a lot of interest in that council. So to answer your question, I don't think it's been finalized, at least not to my knowledge.
I haven't heard anything either. I know that there's been a ton of interest. I know that I had like 8 or 9 constituents reach out to me expressing interest on being on the commission. So we'll see what the governor does.
Sounds great. Well, I think that gets at the question. So we do have an additional question coming in on Facebook from actually an old colleague of yours, ex-Senator Dee Dee Feldman.
Hey.
About the prospect of the passage of legalization and new taxes on cannabis this next session, and if we feel that's a realistic outcome.
Well, Senator Feldman of the wonderful District 13, she set a high bar for anyone who would succeed her. So yes, I think it, as you know, Senator, it all comes down to the specifics of a bill. And I think we really have to work in the interim to get something where when it comes to judiciary, upon which I serve in the Senate, that it's something that we can agree upon. I mean, boy, the will is there. It just, the specifics have to be streamlined. It just has to be a bill that we can agree upon. And so there were just real problems with the bill. And I hope to talk to Representative Martinez about that, just to give him my opinion. But by all means, I really believe the will is there and the timing is right. So it just has to be the right, specifically the right bill.
We got nothing to add. Senator O'Neill is one of the authorities on recreational cannabis in the legislature. Okay. I just follow his lead.
Okay.
Sounds great. Well, thank you, legislators. We do have a question on Facebook from Susan Kelly, curious about the possibility of the legislature going to full-time and potential salaries being made available to our hardworking legislators.
Hi, Susan. Susan's one of my ward chairs, and yours too, right, Senator?
Yes, yes, indeed.
So yes, the issue of a professionalized legislature has been one that we have been working on for a while now, since many of us actually went in 2018. And there was actually a study completed by the Thornburg Foundation on exactly what it might look like to formalize and professionalize our legislature. And that's not just paying our legislators, but it's also looking at expansion of the legislative session, the time length, and the policies and procedures that go into our legislative process. So it's kind of a comprehensive overhaul. Right now, I know that there is a cohort of legislators that continue to look at the issue. I know that a letter was sent out to the Legislative Council on it, but I haven't heard much, and I suspect that's because of COVID. And we have had a lot on our plate lately. I know that there are many that are very, very, very dedicated to making this issue happen, that will not give up on it, because I also believe that it holds the key to really helping our structure as a legislature. Senator may not agree with me on this, but we need to, I'll take a second to kind of personalize it and give a small section of my story. I'm a professional. I am in, the thick of my career, trying to be a full-time lawyer and a wife and a stepmother and a legislator and doing good for my community. And what that means is if I don't have the appropriate time management skills, or if I don't have, or I'm lucky enough to have someone assist me, which I am lucky enough to have, there's no way that I could do this job and serve my constituents to the level to which they deserve to be served, because they put me there. And so while it's great to have volunteers serve in the legislature, because I think the thinking historically is that they would be less apt to make decisions and cast votes to keep their jobs, since this isn't a real job. The flip side of that is, I hope no one will take offense to this, but you kind of get what you pay for, and that you have legislators who are very busy with other things. And if you need them in a pinch, you may not be able to get a hold of them for several days, or, you may not have folks that really can prioritize their role unless they're up in session. And we're only up in session either 1 or 2 months a year, but we're legislators the entire year. So being able to professionalize this job so that I could give 100% attention to my constituency would be a game changer for me, and I think for the state of New Mexico.
And you stole I was going to say that you get what you pay for. That was going to be my first response. But anyway, no, I believe the public support is there for this. Again, I really enjoy it. Well, I do that pre-legislative session questionnaire every year. And I always ask that question, and it's overwhelming of people of District 13 favor the general direction of a professional legislature. There's lots of questions as to how that's going to be done. But by all means, it's one of the side effects of the way it is right now, and I figured this out a couple of years into my service back when I was in the House, was, we're gone. Like we go. We're there for a month, 2 months, and then we're gone. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that we don't have a whole lot of oversight power, but basically what happens is bureaucrats run the state, and it's not the way it should be. And I strongly support a paid professional legislature. And I think the way to do it is to put it to the voters. I think that was Representative Gonzalez, now Senator Gonzalez's bill. But it really needs to be dealt with. And I think, the timing is right on that front too. So I totally support this direction. And I think it's just the smart thing to do. We need a more diverse body, and Representative Hochman-Vigil is a wonderful exception to, we tend to be older and we need people that can do this and go about raise their young families and so forth at the same time and have a career. So those are my thoughts.
Sounds great. Well, thank you, legislators. I know it's a very important issue, the topic of full-time and what the legislature could accomplish. So switching gears slightly, we do have a great question coming in on Facebook from Dan Frampton, who is a school social worker and who's been working on behavioral health reform for a long time. And so he wants to bring an issue to your attention about managed care organizations, and specifically about the data on how much they are spending from state money and how accessible that is to legislators to hold them accountable. So he was curious if you guys are aware of that issue and can speak to what the state's doing to address that.
David, yes, thank you. Great question. So yes, we are aware of this issue. It has been an issue for a long time. So I'm going to put a plug in really quickly for the Human Services Department Cabinet Secretary David Scrace, who has been kind enough to work with me on development of these mental behavioral health issues to put in this bill. And one of the things that he has been considering, and we hopefully won't even need to put into legislation, is utilization of performance-based contracting measures, meaning it's just a fee for service model, which is what we utilize now. Someone gets a fee, we pay for it. We build in performance measures and data requirements into these contracts that make our providers or managed care organizations, as we call them for those Medicaid providers, prove to the state that they are meeting a specific standard with the resources and programming being provided. Meaning, if it's not successful and they can't show that it's successful, we're not going to continue to waste money on that particular programming or resource. So Dr. Scrace has been looking at ways to implement that specific clause in the MCO contracts. It will kind of force a shift in how we contract for these services generally, but I think we're ready for that. Another issue we have is a lot of data. Well, first of all, we don't really collect a lot of mental behavioral health data throughout the state. We have a lot of providers that don't even have access to broadband. That's actually how I got into the broadband issue, is because we have mental behavioral health providers in rural areas who can't do electronic medical records because they have no internet. And if they don't have electronic medical records, they can't participate in things such as the health data record database exchange, which allows for departments like HSD to evaluate programming and also see other claims that are being put in for payment by providers for care coordination. So it's all connected. We need to look at data integration as a whole for the state of New Mexico. We have a tendency to function in silos, which is really bad for several reasons, because if the left hand never knows what the right hand is doing, problems don't tend to be solved. So that's another thing that we're looking at in the Mental Behavioral Health Reinvigoration Act, is how we can use data integration through either a third-party provider or some other way to get all these databases linked up so they talk to one another, and without violating federal laws with regards to medical privacy, making sure that folks have care coordination and continuum of care wherever they are in their process for recovery or mental behavioral health needs. Thanks for the question. Great question.
And Dan, thanks for the work that you do. And again, I would alert you to the existence of our interim committee, Health and Human Services, and my behavioral health subcommittee of that. And if you could contact me, that would be great, because I could, we really need to aggressively, surgically look at this precise issue. And we're setting our agenda for the coming fall and the rest of the summer. So by all means, excellent question, and thanks.
Sounds great, legislators. Thank you, thank you. So we definitely have time for a few more questions, and we've got a good one that is coming in Facebook here from Abby Long, who wants to bring up the issue of youth sentencing and is curious if you guys are aware of the bill that was floated around a couple years back to address extreme sentences in juvenile criminal cases, and what your thoughts were on that issue.
Well, I can, because that was my bill. That is my bill. And as Abby, I believe you know, I was the head of the state juvenile parole board, executive director of the juvenile parole board. I have a lot of experience working with juveniles, and there's a national movement that basically says no matter what the crime, there's no life sentence without parole, without the chance of parole for a juvenile offender. And so that's a bill that I've been working on with my Republican colleagues, and we're still working closely across the aisle. But also for me personally, I'm very comfortable, because this is what I did for 3 years of my professional life, talk to victims. My job at the juvenile parole board was to basically make sure victims of these juvenile crimes were there in our hearings, that they knew that a hearing was coming up for a possible release. And so all the voices need to be heard, and I promised the victims groups and families that I'm not going to do anything without letting them know what form that will take. But just know that I'm very committed to that issue, and it's just real important to me. It's just criminal justice reform is a big thing for me, as is election reform and some of these other broad topics. But thank you for that question, and to be determined, TBD. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thank you, legislators. We do have an additional question from Rebecca Puckstare about the state's film industry and what the state is looking at in order to foster that market in the near future here and make sure it comes back strong for New Mexico.
So I'm in the middle of a windstorm right now. I think I might have to go inside. Senator, can you start off on that one?
And what was the question? I'm sorry, it was just the question again.
The question was about the film industry in New Mexico and how the state is looking to make sure we get back up to the levels we were at before.
Oh gosh, we so need to support that. And the dialogue has been, and again, this falls into the category of protecting what we have at all costs, and then possibly expanding it. I think that what the dialogue that I hear during the discussions is the rural parts of the state want to be convinced that our film industry benefits them. I mean, they, my dear friends from JAL and, other parts of the rural Deming, et cetera, they don't see necessarily how they benefit. They feel it goes directly to Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Las Cruces, et cetera. That isn't true. That really isn't true. But it's, I think it's up to the Film Commission and our wonderful new Secretary of Economic Development to really bring those folks along. Because I feel like if we had less of a polarized view, urban, rural is what it is, on this issue, that we could really go even further and expand the way we should, because it is definitely a successful industry here in New Mexico and needs to be supported. I hope that answers your question. And the windstorm has stopped, or you're okay there?
It's still blowing.
Okay.
Inside
Okay.
now.
Did you want to weigh in on the film industry? And that's important.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly important. And, we just had really important investments in the film industry, made not just in Bernalillo County, but all throughout the state. The purchase of I-25 Studios and, the Netflix agreement and Comcast, NBC Universal coming to New Mexico. I mean, these are partners that have made a commitment to us, and we made a commitment to them. And so I think it's important that we continue to stand behind the film subsidies. I know that they have been kind of the topic of partisanship at times, but I think that's unfortunate because we have data that tells us that for every $1 spent by the film industry, it's bringing in 3 to 4 for New Mexicans and local businesses, and they're hiring local. And we just need to continue to kind of see through what we've already invested in, because it'd be a shame to have gone through all of that to pull back now.
Awesome. Thank you, legislators. And it looks like we have time for about one more question here before we wrap up. And it's perfect because it looks like we have about one question left. So our first one loops back around on the elections bill here. And Dee Dee Feldman wants to ask again, if you could speak a little bit more to why mail-in ballots weren't included in the election bill, or a little bit on the discussion on that issue during the session here.
So Senator Feldman, you know well the history of Senate rules, okay? And that it got hung up in Senate rules, and it had to come out of Senate rules for us to pass the bill. And I don't know the details other than, as we know, as we've mentioned, election issues, mail-in ballots somehow become this lightning rod in a partisan polarized way. So that's the best I can say is the bill that came to the floor of the Senate that I voted on, that I could vote on, they couldn't do like mandatory mail-in election. However, that there was movement on having the Secretary of the Department of Health having the ability in a case of an emergency to make that happen. So that was what my friends on the other side gave up, so to speak. So I hope that answers your question.
That was my understanding of it too, is that the compromise that got it out of Senate rules was the commission that came together that could have the power, should they choose to utilize it, to order a mail-in, an all mail-in election, should they see fit, if the circumstances required.
Awesome. Well, thank you, legislators, and thank you everybody watching from home for all these great questions. I don't see any more additional questions at this time, and we are a couple minutes out from our end date here. So if the legislators want to give some closing thoughts and talk a little bit more about what they was not touched on for this upcoming session here, let's go for it. Well,
if I can, I just want to thank everybody again. Awesome questions. It really helps, it really puts things in focus for me personally as your state senator. And I need to say, I have an election coming up. I'm up for re-election, and I want to ask for your vote. Those of you who are kind enough to tune in tonight, I want your vote in November to continue the work that Representative Hochman-Vigil and I are doing. And I have very specific bills that I'm working on right now. So I just need you to keep me in mind, as they say in New Mexico. I love that phrase. Keep me in mind on November, whenever, what is it, the 2nd or the 4th or whatever, the 3rd. Okay. So, and I'll be mailing you and, phoning you. I wish I could come by and knock on your door, but that's just not going to happen this time around. And by all means, contact me with any questions or concerns that you have.
And thank you. I too want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening. It means a lot to us. Thank you for your incredible questions. It means a lot that people are paying attention, and that you're holding us accountable, and that you want to take the time to communicate with us. I'm really sad that I will not be able to go door to door this year. It's actually crushing to me, but my cell phone is almost always on me. The number is on the website. You can go to nmlegis.gov if you need to communicate with me or ask me a simple question, or if you need my help with anything, please do not hesitate to get a hold of me. I too am up for re-election. 2 years goes by so quickly. And I really want to ask for everybody's support again. It's been one of the most incredible experiences of my life being elected to the legislature, and there's still so much more to do. I'm just getting started, and I would really appreciate the opportunity to go back up there again and continue what I've started and what we want to do. So thank you for spending your evening with us.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Well, thank you everybody at home again for joining us, and thanks for joining the town hall. Have a good one.
Thanks.